October, I and several other students were lucky enough to be taken to an absolutely infamous region of France. And I thought I would take my camera with me to document the trip, so that I could share with you the delights of the Dordogne. So what is so special about the Dordogne? Now, let me tell you. This is one of the best regions for prehistoric archaeology within France. We've got the likes of Lascaux, Pech Merle, Moustier, and many cave and rock shelter sites that you may well have heard of, all tucked in to about 2 valleys, which is mad. And being a prehistoric archaeology student myself, this is quite the apt trip and also quite a nice excuse to have a little holiday in the French countryside. So I hope that you will absolutely delight in joining me on this trip through the Dordogne. Now I'm going to be making a lot of references to various time periods, so here is a very quick timetable that you can go back to whenever I mention anything, such as Aurignacian, Gravettian, Solutrean, Magdalenian. Don't panic, it's all here. So where actually are we? We are in southwest France, kind of near Bordeaux, in one of the Périgord regions near the town of Les. That is a horrible pronunciation, I do apologise. So with that basic information, I invite you to day 1 of the trip.
Welcome to Cougnac!
There are in fact 2 caves here, yet only one contains the art that we were here to see. Dating between at least 25 to 14,000 years ago, the paintings inside this cave have been superbly preserved. Among the somewhat terror-inducing stalactites and stalagmites lie 505 separate motifs. Most of these consist of animals such as ibex and megaloceros, common animals in the area at the time. Others are non-figurative symbols such as these aviforms, also seen in caves such as Pech Merle nearby. Lastly, we have a very rare assemblage of 5 anthropomorphic figures, a couple of whom appear to be impaled. Needless to say, I'm definitely glad to have seen these 20,000 years removed. What's most impressive about this site is not only the insane morphology of the cave itself, but also that we were given an opportunity to see such well-preserved paintings this close up. And unfortunately after this we were meant to see Cap Blanc. However, there was an issue and so we could not. And instead we had a lovely little rest.
Smile! Les
Now after that brief perch, we drove on and we went to go and visit one of the aforementioned rock shelters.
La Moustier! Le Moustier!
And if you're a stone tool fanatic, you might recognise this name, for this is the rock shelter that the Moustier is named after. Now we were also lucky enough to get our own personal guided tour by one of the archaeologists who had been excavating up until 2 weeks before we had visited. As you can see, it has an extensive stratigraphy, so this has both Neanderthal and Homo sapien occupation. We have got dense layers of Levallois, then Biface, then 2 phases of Mousterian, then Chateaubriand, and then Aurignacian. So we've got a whole lot of continual use of this site going on over a period of thousands of years. Now there's also potentially evidence of a Neanderthal burial. When this was first being dug out, there was a particular layer where they found a pit. At the bottom of this pit, they found a tiny Neanderthal neonate. And after many years, this was finally cleaned, it was taken out as a block, it was kept in a drawer, it was lost for a couple of decades, and then some poor soul sat there scraping away at the dirt for a good 3 years to reveal this little baby. Now one of the exciting things about the new lot of excavations is that they are going to be doing some DNA testing, so they can actually now try and find DNA within the sediment. This is going to give us a whole lot of new information about the site. Now after this we were very tired, it had been an incredibly long day, and we went to our bunk beds to take a brief rest before day 2. Now this was a particularly exciting day. As we went on our way to La Ferrassie, as you will see, we were absolutely raring to go for the sites we were going to visit that day. Now, beginning with the first site, La Ferrassie is a particularly famous Neanderthal site. There were in fact 7 Neanderthals found at this site. 5 were children or babies and 2 adults, potentially subadults. Although having said that, this site does range from Neanderthal occupation all the way up to Gravettian. The Mousterian layers, so those of the Neanderthals, are the richest and the most important of these sites, and the 7 Neanderthals found do have some signs of possibly having been buried. Additionally, unlike many of the rock shelters and caves in this area, this does contain an entire sequence, a complete sequence of Aurignacian occupation. We even have evidence of some portable art. We've got rock slabs that were engraved, dating from the Aurignacian, that are contemporaneous with those found in Vogelherd in the Swabian Jura of southwestern Germany. Additionally to that, we've also got some split-base points here, which are these lovely stone tools, and several hand axes found near the Neanderthal burials. As you can see, the layers are absolutely sublime. They are simply so well preserved. And the main vocal argument of this site is the fact that it is one of the main sites that gives evidence to the argument that Neanderthals practiced burial. This wasn't just Neanderthals dying and being left. This was an active attempt at ritual burial by Neanderthals, dating to between 75 and 60,000 years ago. And after this delight, we moved on to Laugerie-Haute, one of the largest rock shelters in Europe.
Oh, where are we? We are currently in Laugerie-Haute in Les This is a very nice site dating from the Gravettian until the
Magdalenian. Now, we might not be completely certain about our history, but luckily someone is. The stratigraphy on this site ranges from the Gravettian to the Magdalenian. Now, considering the stratigraphy, I might as well talk a little bit more in detail about the lithics here. So with the Gravettian, the oldest layers, between about 24 to 22,000 years ago in this particular site, we've got mostly blades. Moving on to a transitional layer before reaching the Solutrean, we have a lot of scrapers, and then in the Solutrean itself, we've got many things. We've got flat-faced tips, notch tips, bay leaves, and essentially many stone tools, flakes via pressure flaking, that are particularly iconic in the Solutrean. And lastly, we've got the Magdalenian, characterised by a lot of chisels and microliths. This site boasts amazing amounts of lithic tools, great stratigraphy, a complete sequence of the Solutrean, and evidence of structures and cultural transitions. Now, although that was a very brief visit, we must move on because we are about to see one of the most exciting sites of the Dordogne.
Lascaux, baby!
Now, if you've not heard of it, Lascaux is a particularly important Magdalenian site. It is covered in cave art. Now, we can't actually visit the site because it was closed off many decades ago. If people go in there and breathe too much, effectively the cave art just begins to degrade. And so they have gone to the trouble of building several different Lascaux models. They are now on number 4. This was a carefully crafted reconstruction of Lascaux Cave. And we had the ultimately delightful experience of being given the headset, walking through and being allowed to experience it as those first people would have when it was discovered. And thus, as was intended, I will let you experience this 21,000-year-old gallery for yourself. was a small museum exhibition afterwards where we can see the different kinds of materials that were used to create this art. We've got a very, very primitive, likely horsehair paintbrushes, which is mad, so good. We've got lots of ochre, we've got a beautiful stone lamp, very, very exquisitely carved, which I later on had the privilege of seeing for real. This one is reconstruction. We're able to paint a picture of how few materials these people had to create such a massive body of work. Now, if you are ever in the area, as I'm sure many people would if they have also been to Lascaux, I would highly recommend you give it a visit. Now, although Lascaux was a highlight, it wasn't entirely the most immersive part of the trip, as we were yet to go into the belly of an engraved cave.
Commarque. Bienvenue à Commarque. Abri du Poisson. Ja. Sehr schön.
This cave, situated beneath the castle, is a secret still under study. It contains over 80 varying depictions, from bovids to female figurines.
I stood over here.
Oh, I can see the tips when you're below.
It's a good view.
Great view. Excellent view. The cave itself is relatively small compared to the others we saw, yet it was still one of the best opportunities to get close to the art. The dates attributed to these carvings are separated into two phases, with the first period of use during the Gravettian and the second in the Magdalenian. Its most prized piece lying in the furthest corner of the cave, a life-sized, or kind of somewhat bigger, horse crouched along the wall. It has surprisingly realistic features and must have taken a long while to carve using simple stone tools as chisels. Breezing into the welcome shelter of Abri du Poisson, we were met with a very impressive stratigraphy. Stretching from the late Aurignacian all the way to the Solutrean, this rock shelter is packed with finds. It was so dense with sediment that by the Magdalenian there was no more room for deposition. Here we have continuous evidence of occupation, with tools, fireplaces, beads, faunal remains and human remains all left behind. Many of the finds are Gravettian and date between 24 to 22,000 years ago. Two individuals left here were that of a 16-year-old girl and a neonate, which is evidence to me of it having been a teenage birth. 6 human skeletons were found in total, and it seems that this was potentially a year-round residence. It is also likely that the whole shelter was painted and engraved. A space alongside the site has been turned into a museum and sports one such engraving itself. Alongside this, we have evidence of many of the common items and specimens that have been found here. Though it hasn't been fully excavated, we still have enough to paint a fairly accurate picture of what this site would have been like in the past. The rest of the day was dedicated to the Museé International de Prehistorie. This museum holds millions of finds, largely from its region, but also from further afield, and takes its visitors through a timeline right from the first Acheulean stone tools all the way to the Bronze Age. Now, I'm no lithicist, but I was quite overwhelmed by the immense amount of stone tools that this room held, largely flint of course, even giving demonstrations of how such fine industries as the Château-Perronian was crafted. After this, we got to, for me, the most interesting bit. The people and the art. Sorry if you're not a fan of skeletons, there will be some dead people around. Because we had several both Neanderthal and Homo sapiens skeletons, in addition to some very famous portable slabs and figurines from the region. Most of these date to the Magdalenian period, which has very wide date margins between 23 and 10,000 years ago. And as you may have noticed, was one of the most pertinent periods for an explosion in artistic creativity within Europe, alongside the Solutrean preceding it. Not to say that the people of previous cultures weren't also partial to a paintbrush. Of course, some of these depictions are somewhat less decipherable than others, with anything remotely resembling a pubis immediately being labelled as female genitalia. Others, such as these very detailed figurines evidently representing animals that we would recognise today. There was also, honestly, quite a creepy demonstration of why sometimes we see fingerless hand stencils, such as those in Cougnac Cave. Like, honestly, why is bro moving like that? It's weird. It's very weird. Anyway, alongside the real life and beautifully carved Lascaux lamp. Now one can't have too much fun in one day, and so once again we retired to our rooms in preparation for the final day. Leaving bright and early, we were deposited at Grotte Combralles. Now, contrary to the singular nature of the name, there are actually 3 parts to this cave. The main attraction was discovered by an overly curious boy in 1901, I believe, and at over 300 metres long, it is incredibly impressive. It was decorated over a period of around 2,000 years, between 13,600 and 11,300 years ago. Here is evidence of burning on the limestone, so people were setting up fires at the entrance of the cave and were likely living there to some degree. Now you must walk a fair way before reaching the first pictures. These mostly consist of animals, although we do see female depictions like those of the Gunnersdorf figurines. It was likely that the engravings were also painted, and most interestingly for me, was that the tour guide explained during some experiments in which they had tried to recreate the art using the firelight, the same sort of lamps that they would have been using back in the Magdalenian. The juniper they used as a wick that was sat in the deer fat gave off somewhat hallucinogenic fumes. Essentially, these pictures were likely perceived as being in motion. With the use of pareidolia, which is essentially used in the shapes on the cave wall that match up with the sort of shape of the image that you want to depict, alongside the flickering of the firelight and the smoke emitted, people were probably getting high as kites, honestly, while they were creating and experiencing this art. And this would have been the case for all of these caves. Catch me doing an experimental thesis.
You getting traffic shots?
I am.
After seeing Combarelles, some of us were dropped off in Les Aisies for a short respite. It was only at this point that I had been informed that the original Cro-Magnon site was right next to the town. And so naturally, I went to have a look, expecting great things.
That's it.
That's it.
I think so.
Anyway, after that anticlimax, it was time to move on to the next site, Grotte Font-de-Gaume. This was a slight trek up a hill to get to, but honestly, it was worth it. The ceilings in this cave are crazy, and once you emerge through a small passageway, otherwise known as the Rubicon, you emerge into the first main gallery, full of bison. These paintings were incredibly well preserved, with the odd hand stencil thrown in there. These Magdalenian artists had insanely accurate pictorial memories. This is one of the only caves in the Dordogne, if not most of Europe, to retain polychrome pictures. With a mix of over 200 painted and engraved depictions, it gives one a great example of how highly decorated, less well-preserved caves would have been. There are also several non-figurative symbols here, such as tetraforms, dots, crosses, and rectangles. There are so many depictions of both animals and potentially anthropomorphic figures here, and it is absolutely delightful that there are still sites like this that people are able to go and visit. Lastly, we come to the final site, Abri du Poisson, the shelter of the fish. Inside this overhang sits a salmon lying upside down on the ceiling. Now, for once, this isn't a Magdalenian piece, but is in fact a Gravettian one. Dating to around 25,000 years, it has incredible detail and was likely sat amongst a host of paintings and less prominent carvings around it, such as this negative hand right here. Fish now are particularly rare in European rock art, so this is a delightful piece to have stumbled upon 133 years ago. Though we also have more utilitarian finds from lower sediments dating to the Aurignacian. After this treat, we went and looked at this absolutely chungus rock shelter sat above. Not that there was anything in it, but you know, we had nowhere else to be. And honestly, after a little frolic around, this basically concluded our trip. This was a delight, and we thank everyone at Aix-Marseille University who organised it. Especially for me, I learnt a lot, I saw a lot, I walked a lot, banging. I hope you also enjoyed, and hope to make some more documentaries actually. That would be very slay. Yes. Anyway, cheers.